What's up guys, TopTierYugioh here, and today we have huge news. First we have the new Yu-Gi-Oh series, YGO Vrains. We also have some new rules that are going to come with that, and then a new summoning mechanic which is called Link Summons, and Link Monsters by extension. And so if you want more news on Link Monsters and the new mechanics, the new anime, definitely subscribe down below and click that little bell so that you're notified when I upload videos. That'd be greatly appreciated. Please like this video so you can always come back to it, because I'm going to try my best to answer all of your Link Monster related questions and help you understand this concept a little bit more. So let's go ahead and get into it. So first we're going to talk about Yugioh Vrains, which is the new anime series after Arc V. And we have a new main character, Yusaku Fujiki, who is a high school student by day and virtual reality duelist by night. But the caveat is that they're really dueling on hoverboards. And so I think that's a really interesting concept, especially that they're in virtual reality. It sort of reminds me of Mega Man, to where the main character had a pretty boring standard life outside of the game. But then he would go home and log in or jack into the program or whatever, and then be very interesting and heroic, and then generally be able to save real life threats from his bed pretty much. And so it'll be interesting to see how they do that, because they're in virtual reality. I'm assuming they're going to be dealing with a lot of cybersecurity, cyber threats, cyber terrorism, maybe fighting viruses. There might be a new virus archetype. It'll be really interesting to see where they take this idea. And the whole theme for this anime is to take a step forward and try. And so I think that's actually has a lot of parallels with the game itself, because these rules that I'm about to talk about are pretty crazy, and they might turn a lot of players off of the game, but you just, take a step forward and try. It's not that bad once you really think about it. And so let's get into some of these new rules and how Yugioh Vrains will be affecting the Yu-Gi-Oh trading card game. And so the first rule is that the playing field will be different. And this is like the most apparent and obvious rule, but we have a brand new field pretty much, and it's very similar. But the differences are that, first, there will be no more Pendulum Zones, and instead you'll put your Pendulum cards into your outermost spell and trap card zones. And so if you're not playing a Pendulum deck, they're just going to be your normal spell and trap card zones. But if you are playing a Pendulum deck, you would place your Pendulum cards in your outermost spell and trap card zones, and then you would have those other three for other spell and traps. And so essentially what it means is that you're not going to be able to set your scales, and also set 5 back row too. So once you set your scales, you only have 3 back row to work with. And I think this is actually sort of a good thing, because a lot of Pendulum decks would just plus so much, because all of your monsters become essentially free, and you still have the same number of other zones to work with. So just the fact that you have 2 more spots to put your cards on the field gives you a much greater advantage on the field. But now they're pretty much taking that advantage away from a lot of Pendulum decks and really sort of balancing it out, as well as balancing other aspects of the game, which we'll get into later. And so the next big change is that your monster zone has been renamed to the main monster zone. And this is where you're going to summon your main deck monsters. And I know this may seem redundant, but you cannot special summon any extra deck monsters to your main monster zone. Like, only main deck monsters. And so I'm sure you're asking, well, where do I summon my extra deck monsters? And then for this, they added 2 new zones to the board, which are called extra monster zones. And this is where you special summon your extra deck monsters. There are 2 on the board. There will be 1 for you and 1 for your opponent. And this is the only spot where you can summon extra deck monsters. Nowhere else. And again, there are 2 zones, 1 will be yours, 1 will be your opponent's. The first player to make an extra deck monster has the choice of which one they can get to, but then as soon as you take 1 extra deck monster zone, the other zone will be automatically assigned to your opponent. And so it'll be impossible to take both of them and then lock your opponent out of extra deck summoning. One's yours and one's your opponent's, you get no more and no less. However, there is a new way of summoning more extra deck monsters, and that is Link Summoning, the new mechanic. And so for this Link Summoning new thing, you have to use Link Monsters. Link Monsters are another type of extra deck monster similar to Synchros, Xyzs, Fusions. They go in your extra deck, and then you summon them from your extra deck using the Link Summoning mechanic. They're blue, they have no level, no rank, and they have arrows on the card which indicate other zones for you to summon your extra deck monsters in. And so remember earlier when I said that you have your main monster zone and your extra monster zone? Well, when you summon your Link monsters, the arrows will point to other monster zones, and now you can summon more extra deck monsters in those zones, and those zones are now considered to be linked to the monster. So let's look at a little example, and because Zodiacs are the best and most popular deck right now, I think it's relevant to look at them. In your standard play, you're going to normal summon or special summon your rat to your main monster zone, and then as always, you're going to overlay for the Borbo. And when you overlay for the Borbo, that will be moved to your extra monster zone. So now that slot has been filled. So now you're going to do your standard zoo combo, you're going to overlay for Tiger Mortar, for Bullhorn, or Broad Bull I should say, and then they're going to detach special summon your rats. And when you summon those rats, they're going to be summoned to the main monster zone. And then your Xyzs are going to stay in your extra monster zone. And then you're going to overlay for your Trident, and then you're going to have your 2 rats on board, and you're going to want to make your other rank 4. That is the point of the combo, to have Trident and another rank 4. But because you already have Trident in your extra monster zone, you can no longer make that second rank 4, so you're stuck with those 2 rats. And so effectively these new rules slow decks down from being able to spam the board with multiple synchro summons, multiple Xyz summons. Anything that just summons a lot of monsters, or a lot of extra deck monsters, will not be able to do so anymore. But now let's look at what link monsters do to change this. And so our main character from YGO Vrains, Yusaku, his main monster is called Decode Talker. And so we're going to talk about the effect and how to summon it later, but let's just look at it for what it is right now. So we have Decode Talker, and it has arrows pointing diagonally left, down, and up. And so what that means is that we'll now be able to special summon extra deck monsters diagonally to that monster zone to the left and diagonally down to the right. But our opponent's also going to be able to summon their extra deck monsters to the zone that's directly up from it or in front of it. But disregarding what the opponent can do because it's our turn, let's look at how the Zodiac combo would work out now that we have a Link monster. And so it starts off the same way. We're going to assume we have the Link monster already on the board, already in our extra deck monster zone, pointing to diagonally down, left, and right. So we would summon our rat as always into our main monster zone. Then we would overlay for the Borbo. And when we overlay for the Borbo, we would move it to one of our new extra monster zones. And remember, we have Decode Talker already in our normal, natural extra monster zone, but we're going to use the zones that it points to. So we could put it in this zone here, and then go through our zoo combo as normal. So we overlay all of our monsters, we end up with our Trident, and then we end up with our 2 extra rats. But now, because we still have 1 free extra monster zone that our Link monster is pointing to, we can use that to summon an extra deck monster. And so now we can overlay both of our rats into that pointed zone, that linked zone, into a rank 4. So we can go ahead and make our Emerald, shuffle some things back, and then we're good. That's our standard zoo combo. This is what we want to do. And so that's what Link monsters do for the game. And so the new rules have restricted how we can summon extra deck monsters. Link monsters will allow us to undo some of those restrictions and then summon multiple Xyz monsters or extra deck monsters in general from our extra deck. And so now the $1 million question that I'm sure everybody is asking is, how do you summon these Link monsters? And so let's go back to our example of Decode Talker. And so Decode Talker is a dark Cybers type, so it's a brand new type similar to Worms and Psychics that came out. And then it's a Link effect monster, and it has the Link of 3. It has 2300 attack, it does not have a defense, and the material requires 2 or more effect monsters. And so let's worry about the effects later. Right now I just want to focus on how it's actually summoned, the Link summoning mechanic in general. And so the way we would Link summon monsters is you look at that Link number, and so Decode Talker says that it's a Link 3, and so we would have to send as many monsters equaling that Link number from the field to the graveyard in order to Link summon it. However, the material says it needs 2 or more effect monsters, and so all 3 of those monsters will have to be effect monsters. And now the benefit of using multiple Link monsters is that if you send a Link monster to the graveyard for the summon of another Link monster, you can use its Link to count as that number of materials. And so what I mean by that is, if you had a Link 2 monster and you sent it to the graveyard, that would count as 2 monsters being sent to the graveyard for Decode Talker. So when summoning Decode Talker, you could either use 3 separate effect monsters, or you could use 1 Link 2 and then 1 effect monster. So it's really only 2 monsters total, however, it counts as 3. So you have multiple ways of summoning Link monsters, which I think is a good thing for the game. And so if you have a higher level or a higher Link monster, there are going to be even more ways that you could summon it. So if you had like a Link 4, you could use a Link 3 and a level 1, or 2 Link 2s, or a Link 2 and 2 monsters. There are a lot of different combinations, however, they add up to that Link that is on the monster that you're trying to summon. So that's the important thing, and then you also have to make sure that the material are still correct. So like Decode Talker requires effect monsters, everything that you send for it still has to be an effect monster. Or I could see other Link monsters in the future depending on type or attribute. All of those things will still matter. So you would just send, like, for example, maybe 2 Earth Link 2 monsters for that hypothetical Link 4 monster. Okay, so other things about Link monsters. Again, they do not have a defense. And what this means is that they cannot be changed to defense position by natural game mechanics or by card effects. So they're unaffected by like Book of Moon, Book of Eclipse, Sword of Concealing Lights. None of those cards would affect it. And someone on Reddit actually mentioned this, but I'm assuming that the way, or the reason that they aren't affected by these cards and can't be turned to defense is that Link summoning depends a lot on the arrows and which way they're pointed. Which way they're pointed gives you access to different zones to special summon more monsters. If you could change them to defense, that would make the arrows point in different directions, and that would be sort of broken if you could just change a monster to defense and then summon more monsters, right? And so I'm assuming they put this in the game to sort of, or this protection on Link monsters to keep it from getting a little bit too broken in the future. Which I think is a good move by Konami. Because if this was something that players figured out later on, man, it would have been crazy. And so again, Link monsters have no defense, and they cannot be changed to defense position. I'm also assuming that cards that would affect their defensive stats, maybe for something else, they would be unaffected by that too. So if there were a card that switched their attack and defense, it wouldn't affect it because it has no defense. And so that is interesting to note. And so the next thing I want to talk about is that you have to pay really close attention to where the arrows are pointing, because those are the zones that you can use in your monster card zone. And also that they stack. So if you have a Link monster in your extra monster zone and it's pointing down, and then you summon another monster that's also pointing down, that wouldn't give you any other extra monster zones to use, because it'd be pointing to your spell or trap card zone, and obviously you can't summon monsters to your spell and trap card zone. And so if you use a Link monster that's pointing down, you'd want to summon another Link monster that points left and right, or maybe left, right, and up diagonally or something. You know, it's gonna be interesting the way you arrange these cards. Like, you might have something pointing down, another one pointing left and right. You know, I don't know some of the different combinations you can have yet, but it'll be really interesting. But yeah, they all stack, and so you can sort of see that from this picture here, to where you have the Link monsters pointing down, and the other Link monster that points left and right. And you can summon a Synchro, an Xyz monster, or other extra deck monsters in general on those two left and right spaces. So finally, there is a quick Q&A at the end of this article, and it is on Yu-Gi-Oh! Organization, and I will put a link to this in the description down below. I'm just going to go through some of these questions and sort of expand on them a little bit more. And so the first one is that, if you special summon an extra deck monster normally and it goes to the graveyard, if you try to bring it back with Monster Reborn, Call to Honor, or any type of revival card, which zone does it go to? And the answer is that it goes into your main monster zone, not the extra monster zone. And so what this tells you is that once a monster is summoned correctly and properly, you can bring it back to the main monster zone. And so this is relevant for something like a Stardust Dragon's effect. Like, when you summon Stardust Dragon properly, use the effect to attribute itself, it comes back in the end phase, go in your main monster zone versus your extra monster zone, even though it was summoned originally to the extra monster zone. And so another card that this would be relevant for is, I would assume, Cyframe Lord Omega, to where you would summon it to your extra monster zone, then you could activate the effect to banish it from the field, and then during your next standby phase, it will return to the field, but it will return to the main monster zone because it was summoned properly, and it's returning to the field, and it does not have to return to its original position. At least I don't think so. So if this is incorrect, definitely let me know in the comment section below, but that's how I'm assuming this will work from the Stardust Dragon and the Revival ruling. And the difference here would be if Cypher Lord Omega has to return to the same exact zone, and that I'm unsure of. So next question is, can you Book of Moon Link monsters? And the answer is that Link monsters cannot be face down, they cannot be in defense position, and so you cannot target them with Book of Moon. And so they would also be unaffected by any other card that would change them to defense, not just Book of Moon. Next question is, if your opponent's only monster is in their extra monster zone, can you attack them directly? And the answer is, no, you cannot. Because extra monster zone is still another monster zone on the field. It counts just as any other monster, it just happens to be the only place where you can special summon extra deck monsters. And so it can still be destroyed by Raigeki, Dark Hole, it can still be attacked. All the other cards, all the other ways that we interact with monsters in this game, we would still interact with monsters that are in the extra monster zone. Again, the only difference is that it probably has an extra deck monster in that zone. And so no, you cannot attack your opponent directly. Next question is, can you destroy 2 set spell or traps that are in your left and right most spell and trap card zones with Wavering Eyes? And the answer is no, because even though that's where you would put your pendulum cards if you were playing a pendulum deck, if you're not playing a pendulum deck, it's just a regular spell or trap card zone. And so if you set like a trap there, and even if you are playing a pendulum deck, if there isn't a pendulum card there, it's just a regular spell and trap card zone. And so if you have a set card there, or even a face-up continuous card, Wavering Eyes would not be able to destroy it. Same with Pendulum Storm or anything of that nature. Unless there is a pendulum card in the pendulum zone, it counts as a regular spell and trap card zone. So those are all the questions that they answered. If you have any more different questions, definitely let me know in the comment section down below, and I can sort of go through all the different resources and try to answer it for you. And I think link summoning really isn't that bad. The new rules aren't too bad either. It's just going to take some getting used to. And just to sort of summarize everything again, there is no pendulum zone anymore. You would just use your outermost 2 of your spell or trap card zones. There is now an extra monster zone and main monster zones. You only have 1 extra monster zone, and that's the only place where you can summon extra deck monsters, unless you have a link monster, which will allow you to summon extra deck monsters in other zones. Link monsters are summoned by sending the material equal to the link number from the field to the graveyard. And so again, a link 3 means you would have to send 3 monsters, or you could also send a link 2 and then 1 monster, or any sort of combination of links and monsters to equal the link number on the card that you're trying to summon. Link monsters have no defense and can't be put in defense. And then all of this can be seen in the new Yu-Gi-Oh series, YGO Vrains. And so Maximum Crisis is actually the last OCG set for Arc V. And so I'm assuming since that just came out for them, in about 3 months time, they're going to have their new set. And that's going to be the first set of Vrains. So I'm assuming the anime will be starting around that same time frame. And so we really don't have that much time left, guys. I mean, the OCG is about 3 months ahead of us, so about 6 months for us. We'll be in Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains Meta. Like, we'll have these rules in about 6 months. So, like, sometime in the summer, we're gonna have the conversion over to these new rule sets, and I'm sort of looking forward to it. Like, it's a really interesting way to spice up the game, and we'll see. Because although we have new rules, new monsters, and it seems sort of like we're being restricted right now, like you're thinking, oh man, I have to summon a Link monster in order to spam the board. But just wait till we get better Link monsters. Just wait till we get some broken ones. I'm sure we'll get some. And then we'll be able to do even more ridiculous things as normal. And so it just sort of adds a new spin to the game, and I'm interested to see where it goes. And so let me know what you think about this down in the comment section below. Again, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, let me know. If you're interested in more content, please subscribe and click the little bell so that you're notified. I really appreciate that a whole lot. But as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.
Remember that time, those cerulean tides, sapphire, a sapphire.